Now we are live. How's everyone doing?
Good.
Good to see everybody here. Back again, another Thursday evening, live from Toronto. You know, one thing about Canada, we hold our reputation. I think we saw 4 seasons in the last 24 hours. Legit. It was Yesterday was 21 degrees, and then an hour ago it was blowing snow in my face. Like it was freezing. I went to
it was -8. It was -8 degrees.
Like, what happened? And just a crazy country we live in, but it is the place that we do call home, and to be appreciative, I guess, for all the good things that Canada gives us. But we're here learning Torah with Jimmy, Warren, and myself. And since the last time we learned, a lot has happened in the world. Certainly, of course, the restart of the war in Israel. So we have our soldiers in mind. We have the captives in mind. We have our tefillot and our learning be for their protection. Hashem should protect all of our hayalim and all of Am Yisrael. And as we normally do, we get Warren to give us a recap of what we learned last week. And through that recap and everything we're going to learn today, like we said, shall be a zechut, v'shmira, and hatzlacha for all of Klal Yisrael. Amen. Warren, it's all yours. Go for it.
Okay, so very quickly, we're still in the first part of this book. We're moving quite slowly, but that's good because there's a lot of content in what we're learning. Last week, we just learned. I'm just going to point out a few key things that we learned. The Rambam continued on his big belief that Midrashim are all parables. He said they're all parables, quoting him. He actually started writing a book to explain the true meaning behind the Midrashim and had to stop because he realized that they're parables for a reason. It's to conceal it from certain individuals and elements that shouldn't know the true meaning. So he actually stopped. So it would have been beautiful to see all that. He did go over a couple of parables as examples in what we learned last week. I'm not going to go through that now, but they were very insightful, and we're going to go through many more throughout the book. He mentioned that we should not. There was one passage that was very hard for us to understand. I personally think I won't speak for everybody. I think it said that we should not apply the understanding of a parable to any halacha, because a parable, the interpretation of a parable is subjective. So it's not something that lends itself to halacha. And I'll leave you with one quote before we continue on this whole theme of midrashim and parables. He says, the inner meaning of the words of the Torah are pearls, while external meaning of all parables are worth nothing. So that's how far the Rambam goes in terms of the midrashim and the parables and how little value it has if you just learn it on the surface. We can start.
Okay, Jim, anything to add?
No, that's pretty much the summary of last week. So let's dig in. Okay,
let's do it. We're on page 12 in the sefer that we are using. Again, for those joining us for the first time, this is the book that we are using. Try to get there. We go. No, I can't really get a good focus, but okay. You'll find it on Amazon. Okay, page 12, towards the bottom of the page, the Rambam says, know that the prophetic parables are of 2 kinds. In some of these parables, each word has a meaning, while in others, the parable as a whole indicates the whole of the intended meaning. In such a parable, very many words are to be found, not every one of which adds something to the intended meaning. They serve rather to embellish the parable and render it more coherent, or to conceal further the intended meaning. Hence, the speech proceeds in such a way as to accord with everything required by the parable's external meaning. Understand this well. Okay, let's see some examples. An example of the first kind of prophetic parable is the following text. The pasuk says, and behold, a ladder set up on the earth, and so on. Ve'ineh sulam mutzav arza, that's from the pasuk in Parashat Vayetze. In this text, the word ladder indicates one subject. The words mutzav arza, set up on the earth, indicate a second subject. And the words, and the top of it reached to heaven, indicate a third subject. The words, and behold, the angels of God, indicate a fourth subject. The word ascending indicates a fifth subject, and the words descending indicate a sixth subject. And the words, and behold, the Lord stood above it, indicate a seventh subject. Thus, every word occurring in this parable refers to an additional subject in a complex of subjects represented by the parable as a whole. Okay, so that's an example of a very deep type of parable.
Where every word has a meaning.
Yeah.
The word.
An example of the second kind of prophetic parable is the following text. I'm not sure where this text is from. Looking for a source over here. Proverbs. Okay. Mishlei. So Shlomo Melech says, "For at the window of my house I looked forth through my lattice, and I beheld among the thoughtless ones, I discerned among the youths, a young man void of understanding, passing through the street near her corner, and he went away to her house. In the twilight, in the evening of the day, in the blackness of night and the darkness. And behold, there met him a woman with the attire of a harlot, and wily of heart. She is, I don't know how to pronounce that word.
Riotous.
Riotous and rebellious, and so on. And she is in the streets, now in the broad places, and so on. So she caught him, and so on. Sacrifices of peace offerings were due from me, and so on. Therefore came I forth to meet thee, and so on. So whenever he says and so on, there's other words here that he's just not filling in. I have decked with coverlets, and so on. I have perfumed my bed, etc. Come, let us take our fill of love, and so on. For my husband is not at home, and so on. The bag of money, and so on. With her much fair speech she causeth him to yield. With the blandishment of her lips she enticeth him away. Okay, so clearly that is a parable and metaphor of the Yetzer Hara. That's what that is in reference to. And I think what the Rambam will probably say here is that this entire section of Pesukim is one big idea. Rather, don't take every single word with meaning. The outcome of all this, says the Rambam, is a warning against the pursuit of bodily pleasures and desires. Accordingly, he, Shlomo, likens matter, which is the cause of all these bodily pleasures, to a harlot, who is also a married woman. In fact, his entire book is based on this allegory. We shall explain in various chapters of this treatise his wisdom in likening matter to a married harlot, and we shall explain how he concluded this book of his with a eulogy of the woman who is not a harlot, but confines herself to attending to the welfare of her household and husband. Exactly. For all the hindrances keeping man from his ultimate perfection. Actually, I never thought of that. That's a chidush for me. This is the first time I thought of that. I've not thought of that. First time I've seen this idea. For all the hindrances keeping man from his ultimate perfection, every deficiency affecting him, and every disobedience come to him from his matter alone, as we shall explain in this treatise. This is
so what you're saying here is really interesting. The pursuit of bodily pleasures is pretty much the cause of all evil. Is what causes everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's as simple as that. It's the pursuit of bodily pleasures. You know, why do men do what they do? Why do they steal? Why do they lie? Why do they cheat? Why do they all those sort of things? It's kind of silly, right? It's all just to please your senses, right? Like it seems a little bit, well, not a little bit, like an animal, basically.
And that's, if you remember in Ramchal, he says exactly that we're imbued with two souls: an animal soul,
mm-hmm.
and then the human soul, or the elevated soul, right? So, and he says that's what differentiates us from animals, is that the animal only has the animal soul. They don't have the soul with the ability to elevate itself and get closer to Hashem, right? So yeah, in a way, we have an animal inside, Every human has an animal inside, and an animal soul inside. And the one that pursues his bodily pleasures is allowing that soul to win over the Yetzer Tov. I always say, I remember I was speaking to actually was one of my sons. I was mentioning to him that when you're about to make a decision about to do something good or bad, the decision isn't happening at that time. The decision happened over a period of time where it depends on which dog you fed inside of you, right? So if you have inside of you an animal soul and you have inside of you a Yetzer Tov, so over time, you're going to be feeding each one of these. You're going to be learning Torah, you're going to be doing chesed, you're doing good deeds, you're feeding the good soul. If you're doing bad things and you're without getting into too many details, but pretty much gallivanting with the gentleman that's with the harlot in the story of the Rambam, then you're feeding your animal soul. So when the time comes to make a decision, who's going to win out is the soul that you fed more over time, right? So the decision isn't being taken at that time. It's sort of a process that you go through. And yeah, I think you're right. But the one thing I was thinking about when you said it's only about the bodily,
the pursuit of bodily pleasures.
Yes, I was thinking, what about power? Power, honor. Those are things that are pursuits that are not bodily pleasures, but maybe the person that is after that, the purpose of that is in order to gain bodily pleasure.
That's
right?
exactly what he's saying.
So yeah, it's to feed the animal soul. Absolutely.
Yeah. Which
Absolutely.
seems it seems kind of like silly, right? You're gonna do all that. You're gonna lie. You're gonna hurt somebody. You're gonna do whatever it is just so you can feel good here. So this sense can be, it really doesn't make sense. When you see it in truth, it's a big silliness. The two things that I take away from what we've learned so far, which is an interesting thing, is that so each parable can either have can be action packed where every word means something, and then other parables like with the long one we just read in Mishle can just have an overall meaning.
So what's the difference? What do you think the difference is between he made a point of telling us parable number 1, and here's parable number 2.
Don't make the mistake.
What do you find is the difference between the two?
I think he's just trying to warn us that don't think every parable has to be interpreted word for word. Don't necessarily.
Well, that's for sure.
Yeah, yes. I think that's the point he's trying to make.
That's for sure his main point. However, I actually think that these two parables are correlated. They both kind of speak to the same idea. You have a ladder. That ladder is facing heavenward, but it's mutzav arza. It's grounded on physicality, okay? And you have this choice of, like Jimmy said, which soul are you going to feed? Are you going to go up the ladder or are you going to go down the ladder? And so I think it's not a coincidence that he chose these two. He probably did that on purpose. And to further your point, why can't people grow in their ruchniyut? Why can't people grow in their learning? They hear classes. They're a lot of them are surrounded with Torah. They get these meaningful minutes and these 2-minute videos, inspiring videos, and then yet they stay kind of stagnant. And I think to your point, Warren, I think that you were right, is because like the Rambam saying, it's all because of this, because they can't let go of the physical desires for whatever it is, and that's every
pleasures, physical pleasures. But then why does he say an example of the first kind of prophetic and then an example of the second kind of prophetic parable? So it appears that there's a difference in the kind of parable.
Correct.
Is it maybe that one is shorter and one is longer, which is what Warren said, or is there something else that I'm missing?
But it's pretty clear that's what he's saying, that one is full of meaning. Every word has a meaning, or almost every word, and others are not. They can be lengthy, and you got to catch what the idea is.
I think you're right. Yeah, that's what he seems to be saying here. Every word, in the first example, every word occurring is complex and has a meaning. And in the second one, is that you take it as a whole.
So what's
You
really
take it as a-
interesting for me here is that he points out, maybe to us it's obvious, but I think for many it may not be, that the first kind, the example he gives about the ladder, that's a parable. He says, do not, he's obviously saying, don't take that whole episode. He didn't, like there weren't angels going up and down in terms of physicality.
Well,
It's
it was a dream. Let's not
So it
forget.
was a dream. I thought it was interesting also the
Right.
difference. The first one was a dream and was kind of what's the word? Was a fantasy. Was something that you don't. It's not a real life thing that you would see. Whereas in the second parable, it's a very human, story. So it's not angels. It's not a ladder going to the sky. It's an actual story that can happen between human beings, and it's very literal. So it's literal. The first one is sort of spiritual, and then the second one is a much more literal story where it's not telling you things that are like cartoonish, but more broad, and there's a message in the whole story. So good point. You know what I just realized? The fact that he keeps saying and so on means that not every word has to be analyzed.
correct.
The story has to be analyzed. Whereas in the first parable, every word had to be analyzed.
Mhm.
So that's
Yeah.
it's a difference. Yeah. The first one is
There may be a difference also. The first parable is in the written Torah, and the second parable is Mishle. Not taking anything
Mishle.
away from Mishle, but
enough.
we know that every word in the written Torah has so much meaning behind it, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So maybe I don't know if this is his point. One of his points. Maybe when we analyze parables in the written Torah, they have to be analyzed, scrutinized, like every word. When it's outside, not necessarily. Not necessarily. Maybe yes, maybe no. I don't know.
Did you notice the choice of wording? And again, I haven't seen the original text, and I wouldn't understand the Arabic. But he writes here, he concluded this book, Mishle, with a eulogy of the woman who is not a harlot, but confines herself to attending to the welfare of her household and husband.
In contrast to the
No, in contrast, fine, I get it. In contrast to the
Yes.
harlot,
yes,
okay, this woman stays home and is loyal. But why call it a eulogy?
why make an allusion to death?
Yeah. Why refer to it as
A eulogy.
unless,
the question,
unless the only thing I can think of is he never found that woman, right? Eshet Chayil Mimsa, right?
Ah.
So it's the eulogy is the fact that he searched and he couldn't find, or at least it's difficult to find.
well, if he couldn't find, I mean that he had 1,000 wives, or 300 wives and 900, 700 concubines, or something like that. So
yeah,
so he had an opportunity to try it out, but that's an interesting point. I thought maybe he said eulogy because he mentions that before he talks about the Eshet Chayil in Mishle. I'm not sure. That's why I thought maybe you guys knew that. Before the Eshet Chayil in Mishle, does he mention death or anything like that, or not?
I'm not. I have it here actually. I don't think so.
Because it is a strange word for him to use.
So maybe the word eulogy here. You have to remember the English in this translation is very, very different than what we're used to. Maybe eulogy doesn't necessarily mean when someone dies. It's like how do you say it? Like a someone that gives like a speech, like a formal speech or something. Maybe the definition of eulogy is not necessary. It's not only
That's
that.
what I'm saying. I don't have the original. Again, I wouldn't be able to understand the Arabic, anyways. It could be he used that lashon, and it could be he didn't. So, I looked at the last few psukim before Eshet Chayil. He makes no mention of death. So
it's interesting. It's interesting that Google or Webster's defines eulogy as a speech or piece of writing that praises someone or something highly, typically someone who has just died. So it doesn't mean it has to be someone who just
Okay.
died.
Correct. Yeah.
So that could be right, Ord.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go on. Let's read that sentence again. For all the hindrances keeping man from his ultimate perfection, every deficiency affecting him, and every disobedience come to him from this matter alone, as we shall explain in this treatise. This is a proposition that can be understood from this parable as a whole. I mean that man should not follow his bestial nature. I mean his matter, for the proximate matter of man is identical with the proximate matter of the other living beings. And as I have explained this to you and disclosed the secret of this parable, you should not hope to find some signification corresponding to every subject occurring in the parable, so that you could say, what can be submitted for the words, sacrifices of peace offerings were due from me. This day have I paid my vows.
Yeah.
What subject is indicated by the words, I've decked my couch with coverlets? And what subject is added to this general proposition by the words, for my husband is not at home? The same holds good for the other details in this chapter, for all of them only figure in the consistent development of the parable's external meaning, the circumstances described in it being of a kind of typical for adulterers. Also, the spoken words and other such details are of a kind typical of words spoken among adulterers. Understand this well from what I have said, for it is a great and important principle with regard to matters that I wish to explain.
Yeah. So when he says that at the end of his paragraph, we have to pay close attention to what he's saying, right? Because he's laying a foundation for the rest of the book. And I'm trying to see if there's something that he said in the last part of this paragraph that we didn't gain from before. So there's no, is he saying to us, when you read the words like, because there are words in the story, the second story, there are words that they seem superfluous, but in a way they're not. Like, for example, when she says, I have decked my couch with coverlets. Okay, so that, she's trying to entice the man even more by I've done this to make my couch better.
I think what he's saying is that one thing is to write a commentary on something, like what do you think that means, but it doesn't take away from the overall theme of the parable or what the message is being said. Versus the case of the latter, there's every phrase, like he said, is a different nimshal, is a different lesson. This is one big lesson. What does the couch and the coverlets refer to? Okay,
keep your eye on the ball. Don't get distracted. He's saying not to get distracted.
Yeah, I think the point he's trying to make with this one is to understand this well. The principle, I think, is that we already learned that he's just repeating it. We don't need to look for meaning in every part of a midrash or a parable. Not necessary. Like, don't be foolish to think you always, that we have to strive and understand every single word, because hopefully he'll get to a point where he can distinguish. He can be a bit more specific and distinguish when do you dig deeper and when is it not necessary. Sometimes it's obvious. Like the example he just gave, it's obvious. It's a very long piece in Mishle, and a lot of it is just like background to the story, to the point. So it's kind of obvious. But I think sometimes it won't be that obvious. It could be a midrash where you're thinking, should we analyze every single word here? Does that word mean? Is there a significance behind that, or is it just to help understand what the point is?
So how about this? How about the point of it all? The point of the midrash is to pass on a message that's deeper than what's on the surface. That's the purpose of the midrash. So maybe what he's saying is, with this second type of parable, how do you get someone to pay attention? You keep them interested. How do you keep a human being interested in a story? Is you make the story attractive. You make the story interesting. So the story has interesting anecdotes within it to keep the person entertained. But don't think that's what the story or parable is really about. It's about keeping you watching and listening and going from point to point. But at the end of the day, it's really to pass on the message that's in the mashal. That's the second. So, for example, when it talks about my peace offerings, talks about the coverlets, this is part of the thing that makes it a more enticing story, that would make it more relatable to someone seducing someone else. But don't get caught up in, well, so what does the coverlet mean? It's not what it's about. It's about the message of the parable. Whereas in case number one, it is about the ladder. It's about the every detail, right? So I think that's where I'm seeing it a little clearer now, the difference.
Zach. Okay, let's finish this little piece. When, therefore, you find that in some chapter of this treatise I have explained the meaning of a parable and have drawn your attention to the general proposition signified by it, you should not inquire into all the details occurring in the parable, nor should you wish to find significations corresponding to them. For doing so would lead you into one of two ways, either into turning aside from the parable's intended subject, meaning you missed the whole point, or into assuming an obligation to interpret things not susceptible of interpretation that have not been inserted with a view to interpretation. The assumption of such an obligation would result in extravagant fantasies such as are entertained and written about in our time by most of the sects of the world, since each of these sects desires to find certain significations for words whose author in no wise had in mind the significations wished by them. Your purpose rather should always be to know, regarding most parables, the whole that was intended to be known. In some matters it will suffice you to gather from my remarks that a given story is a parable, even if we explain nothing more. For once you know it is a parable, it will immediately become clear to you what it is a parable of. Mm-hmm. My remarking that it is a parable will be like someone's removing a screen from between the eye and the visible thing.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So he's saying that once you know it's a parable, you should be able to figure it out. The key is knowing what's a parable and what's not a parable. And what's not a parable. So we go back to what I mentioned, I think last week, Rav Saadia Gaon, where he says, how do you know what to interpret and what not to interpret? I don't know. There's probably a lot of opinions on this, but I really like his view that when it's something difficult to understand, you interpret it. You know that you really have to really dig in. And when it's something that's straightforward, you don't necessarily have to. So in the case of the ladder, if you read the ladder, the whole thing, the Pesukim, the 2-3 Pesukim about this dream that he had, on the surface, it makes no sense. Like, what's going on here? Like, you don't know what's going on, right? You have to really dig in deep to understand what, every piece. We have a Chachamim who uncover all this for us, right? But it's obvious that it's not, you can't understand it without digging. Whereas the second story is, you can understand it. It's just, it's a way.
Good. I think, he's setting the stage to let us know to be careful when we're reading when we start chapter 1, that we shouldn't be taking everything he's saying literally, and that we should be careful to know when we should and when we should not take things literally. So, when he's setting the stage, the reason I'm bringing that up is because my son, Amram, has been following the podcast with his class, and so he was asking me if at any point in time we're going to start actually speaking about concepts that are in Mora Nivukhin, and because he doesn't have the book yet, right? So I said, no, this is the introduction, and we're laying the groundwork for what the Rambam is going to say. And so this is really important because it's there are things I remember. There are things in here where he does speak in allegory and he speaks in parable, and if you were to take it literally, you'd be lost. So,
we still have about 5 pages to go to before chapter 1, so we're still in the introduction.
Yeah, we're in the introduction, exactly. It's important to note.
Yeah. Okay, he now lays some instruction with respect to this book. If you wish to grasp the totality of what this treatise contains, so that nothing of it will escape you, then you must connect its chapters one with another, meaning read it in order. And when reading a given chapter, your intention must be not only to understand the totality of the subject of that chapter, but also to grasp each word that occurs in it in the course of the speech, even if that word does not belong to the intention of the chapter. So I think those are the concepts that he brings down. For the diction of this treatise has not been chosen at haphazard, but with great exactness and exceeding precision, and with care to avoid failing to explain any obscure point.
What's the word diction mean? For the diction, the order is the.
Isn't this diction like
The writing, the writing down, the putting together of, writing down of this treatise.
Yes, is it the order or the wording? Like what's he referring to? For the diction of the treatise has not been chosen haphazard.
I think it's the same thing, the wording order.
Yeah.
The wording and the order?
Both.
Yeah, I think so.
Because the wording would be obvious, but I think the
Well,
order.
he speaks about the order, right? That this whole first, that's what he said in this instruction is regarding to.
Yeah, in a sense, it means composition, right? So when he's letting you know that the composition of this whole thing, the order has been very carefully put together.
Right.
So that's just a different way of saying a very simple concept.
Yeah. We have to be careful with the words he uses because sometimes they're confusing. Yeah.
And nothing has been mentioned out of its place, save with a view to explaining some matter in its proper place. Save means accept.
To accept.
Mm-hmm.
You therefore should not let your fantasies elaborate on what is said here, for that would hurt me and be of no use to yourself. You ought rather to learn everything that ought to be learned and constantly study this treatise, for it then will elucidate for you most of the obscurities of the law that appear as difficult to every intelligent man. He writes very similar when he writes the Mishneh Torah, right? It's like, just learn this, you'll be fine. He's a good salesman. That's
He's a pretty smart guy, right?
Yeah.
So he was good at what he was good at what he did. So I mean, he could.
Confident. He was very confident.
Well, yeah.
He was. He was also.
Look at the next words. I adjure by God. That's a very strong word. I adjure by God may be exalted, every reader of this treatise of mine, not to comment upon a single word of it, and not to explain to another anything in it save that which has been explained and commented upon in the words of the famous sages of our law who preceded me. But whatever he understands from this treatise of those things that have not been said by any of our famous sages other than myself should not be explained to another.
Wow. So this is really like a very secretive book.
Well, he got into big trouble with this book.
Right?
Yeah.
This is a very
The Rambam was put in Cherem. This is a big. I mean, imagine. He's going to be using Greek logic.
But he's actually warning. He doesn't want it to get out. He's saying you're going to learn some secrets here that the other sages have not taught.
Yeah.
But I don't want you to repeat it to anybody. That's. I made that mistake because when I read it the first time, I saw so many amazing things in here that I still to this day would say, you know what the Rambam says in Mora, Nebukhin. So basically, I should not be doing that. We should not be doing that.
You'll find that on many occasions when you'll do that, people will just look at you strange.
They do look at me strange.
Yeah.
There's a thing on Korbanot we're going to learn on Korbanot. I'll give you just an advanced thing. Yeah, Jimmy, you probably learned this. That the Rambam believes that in the time of Mashiach, the Korbanot will not return.
Correct.
Right? And he gets into a lot of detail and gives all the reasons why and why it's silly to think that they will and so on. And that's contrary to the vast majority of the Chachamim, what they believe. So when I mentioned this a couple of times over the many years, I read this maybe 10, 15 years ago, the people I was telling were looking at me strange. To me, it made sense. It was like I was happy to hear it because it didn't make sense. But when I was repeating it, it didn't make sense. So maybe that's why he's saying.
He's telling you not to repeat it. You
"Don't
repeat it.
repeat it. Don't repeat it." Yeah.
Exactly. One of the wisest things is when you learn Torah and you listen to a chidush, and it's like that lightning that the Rambam talks about, that all of a sudden everything is illuminated and you understand everything, and then it goes away after time and so on. So I remember, I'll never forget, Lawrence Kellerman was in Kehila about 10, 15 years ago, and I learned a big lesson with him. He had just given a shiur, and I took his shiur, right? And I took what I learned, and then I went down and I told somebody at the Kiddush, maybe. Okay, I don't remember. And I offered the information. I offered the Kiddush, right? And the person looked at me and had a terrible argument with me. Didn't agree with me, and where did you come up with that? And so I ran upstairs to Rabbi Kellerman, and I told him what happened. I go, "Can you believe what happened? I was just in your shiur and I heard this tremendous chidush, and I went and I told someone." And he looked at me and he said, "At no point in your story did you tell me that he asked you a question." I said, No, I was so excited that I offered. He goes, "Don't do that." He said, "When Hashem wants you to talk, he'll give you a cue. And usually that's a question." And he went on to tell me an amazing story that happened in his house with a reformed woman that came to spend Shabbat. She kept criticizing the family and everything they were doing, and he didn't say a word, and his wife was upset with him. And he said, "I'm not going to say a word because she hasn't asked me a question." So she came back the following week, shockingly, and he didn't say anything, and his wife was upset. Like, you keep letting her criticize. He says, "But she hasn't asked me anything, so I'm not going to." She came back a third week. Nobody could believe it because she kept complaining. In the third week, she asked a question. And then he looked at me. He told me the story. He looked at me. He goes, that woman today teaches in a yeshiva. And it's all because if I would have started criticizing or telling her things in the first week, she would have never come close to Torah or anything like that." He says, so you have to know that if someone doesn't ask, don't offer.
When it comes to secrets, especially when it comes.
For sure, when it comes to secrets, but
because these things that he's teaching us here are secrets. So it begs the question: should we be doing a podcast about this if he doesn't want us to tell others of these secrets that we're trying to learn to our best of our ability? I think I know the answer. It's a rhetorical question. I think anyone that joins, that listens to the podcast or any shiur or any in the shul, it's okay to tell them because they're seeking to know what these.
They ask the question, like in other words, by appearing or they're asking the question.
But somebody not random, but somebody in synagogue, even if they're learned, even if they're Talmid Chacham, if they're not interested in learning more in Nebuchim or content of more Nebuchim, no matter how smart they are and how learned they are, we should not be telling them.
Agreed.
That's what he's saying. I don't know if
I agree.
But that's what the Rambam is warning us of in here.
Yeah, absolutely. I can tell you some big Talmid Chachams that I've told concepts of, that I got in Ramchal. And they said, no, I don't want to. I don't. That's not my area. My area is here, and they, it's not for that. Like I'd rather stick to Gemara and Halacha, and everybody's got their neshama is. So yeah, you gotta wait. You gotta wait for your cue when Hashem wants you to offer information. But I had an interesting. Sorry to go off topic, but an interesting development last week where someone came up to me and I gave them some concepts. They asked, I gave them some concepts. The question was why in the first story of the Torah, Hevel, who's the good guy, dies. Why would Hashem put the Hevel is the good guy, Cain is the bad guy. In the first story of the Torah, the good guy dies and loses. Why would that be the first story? So I gave them a bit of an answer that Rabbi Yesayag had once told us. Rabbi Yesayag's quick answer to me was, because you don't know the whole story, is Hevel actually comes back as Moshe. So it's really, he didn't lose. And then I had and explained how we know that Hevel came back as Moshe and so on. So when I explained this to the person was upset. And the person said to me, but why doesn't everyone know this? Why is this like, how come this is only like a few people know this kind of stuff of Torah, right? And I remember I mentioned it to the rabbi on Shabbat. I told him that I had that discussion where somebody asked me, why can only a few people get access to these pieces of information, of sod, of secrets that are real, but not everybody has access to? And the only thing I could tell the person was, even me, like there's certain information that I could learn today that if I would have gotten it in my hands 30 years ago, A, I wouldn't have understood it, and B, I would have misused it. So you have to look for it, and then you need to get there, right? It's a process. Because if it also the information gets in the wrong hands, I think it's dangerous. That's another point. And I think I've mentioned in previous podcasts where I've sometimes offered some of this secret information. We use the word secret, but it's information that's not publicly taught in grade 3 in school. And so the person I've told just laughed and made a joke of it, and think it's a joke. So yeah, that's it. And then it becomes a chilul Hashem. So you have to be careful with this information, and the Rambam is preparing us for that. That's the reason why they told us not to read this book when we were young, right? If it's in the wrong hands, the information can be abused. Yeah.
Chazak.
Okay.
Nor should he hasten to refute me. Okay. Now,
Right.
So not only don't I don't want you to quote me, but don't refute me at the same time. For that which he understood me to say might be contrary to my intention. He thus would harm me in return for my having wanted to benefit him, and would repay evil for good. All into whose hands it falls should consider it well, and if it slakes his thirst, though it be only on only one point from among the many that are obscure, he should thank God and be content with what he has understood. So if you get one thing. You could say like Dayenu, okay, we got it. Like it's good, and be thankful, which is a good lesson in general. Sometimes you do people learn Daf Yomi, and they I learned Daf Yomi, and I don't get any of it. And 90% I just okay, but you got 5%. Like if you got one idea, if you learn Daf Yomi, I'm just using this as a random example. It could be anything. You learn a parak a day. You learn. If you have one chidush that you got that you knew or now before more than you didn't know, then it's worth it. It's worth it. And I think a lot of people sometimes are scared to engage in difficult subjects or long subjects or long-term projects because they're afraid of not getting majority. And the advocates for Daf Yomi was exactly that. We know you're not going to get all of it. And we're not stupid. You're not going to just master Shas in 7.5 years, learning it in 35 minutes or 45 minutes. No, it's not going to happen. But you're going to get something. You're going to get something, and for that you got to be thankful for. Be content with what he's understood. If, on the other hand, he finds nothing in this treatise that might be of use to him in any respect, he should think of it as not having been composed at all. If anything in it, according to his way of thinking, appears to be in some way harmful, he should interpret it, even if in a far-fetched way, in order to pass a favorable judgment. For as we are enjoined, top of page 16, to act in this way towards our vulgar ones, all the more should this be so with respect to our erudite ones and sages of our law who are trying to help us to the truth as they apprehend it. I think that's a very important statement because we're very quick to judge. And he's saying here, you have to be dan lekap zechut, pass favorable judgment on people trying to teach you, and don't be quick to criticize and put down and say this doesn't make sense, or you're talking tonterias, and stop for a moment and figure it out. I know that among men generally, every beginner will derive benefit from some of the chapters in this treatise, though he lacks even an inkling of what is involved in speculation. A perfect man, on the other hand, devoted to law, and, as I have mentioned, perplexed, will benefit from all of its chapters. How greatly will he rejoice in them, and how pleasant will it be to hear them. But those who are confused and whose brains have been polluted by false opinions and misleading ways deemed by them to be true sciences, and who hold themselves to be men of speculation without having any knowledge of anything that can truly be called science, those will flee from many of its chapters. Indeed, these chapters will be very difficult for them to bear because they cannot apprehend their meaning, and also because they would be led to recognize the falseness of the counterfeit money in their hands, their treasure and fortune held ready for future calamities. There's a metaphor for you. God, may he be exalted, knows that I have never ceased to be exceedingly apprehensive about setting down those things that I wish to set down in this treatise. For they are concealed things. None of them has been set down in any book written in the religious community in these times of Galut, in exile. The books composed in these times being in our hands. How then can I now innovate and set them down? However, I've relied on two premises. The one being the sages saying in a similar case, it's time to do something for the Lord. And the second being, let all thy acts be for the sake of heaven. Upon these two premises have I relied when setting down what I have composed in some of the chapters of this treatise. To sum up, I am the man who, when the concern pressed him, and his way was straitened, and he could find no other device by which to teach a demonstrated truth, other than by giving satisfaction to a single virtuous man while displeasing 10,000 ignoramuses, I am he who prefers to address that single man by himself. And I do not heed the blame of those many creatures. For I claim to liberate that virtuous one from that into which he has sunk, and I shall guide him in his perplexity until he becomes perfect and he finds rest.
See, you know what he's doing here, right? You know what he's doing. He's
master salesman.
Well, no, salesman or not, he knows he's going to be attacked by the rabbinical authorities of the time, and he's pretty much saying,
I don't care,
and I'd rather save one person than make 100 ignoramuses happy and appeased. And it's pretty clear that he was one of these rabbis that was not afraid to leave the norm. In those days, people were afraid. People, just followed whatever the majority of the rabbis.
Even today, even today is the same. Today it's the same.
I don't know. Today there's a lot. I find there's a lot of brave rabbis. Like I know some brave rabbis that even have like Pesach WhatsApp groups.
Yeah, who are those guys?
That's brave. I'll tell you, that's brave.
We're just getting started. And the sun hasn't even started yet.
Yeah, but it's brave. But it takes a certain type of courage. It takes a certain type of I'm prepared. And he's saying it clearly that he knows what's going to happen, and it happened.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was really attacked for Mora Nivouchim, not so much for Mishneh Torah, but for Mora Nivouchim, he was attacked, and if I'm not mistaken, was put in cherem. I don't know if he was or the book was, but he had to leave, or there was an issue. There was a whole issue with this book. And by the way, the Ramchal the same, right? The Ramchal had to run twice. They came from Italy. He had to go to Holland. From Holland, he went to Israel, all because he was ahead of his time. I mean, look at all the big Chachamim today consider the Ramchal and the Rambam to be top authorities. And back in their time, they were considered to be, outside the flock.
Yeah.
So isn't that crazy? That's, to me, it's just fascinating.
I think that last paragraph, to sum up, might be one of the best paragraphs I've ever read. It gives me chizuk
Sure.
as an educator, as a mechanech, as a rabbi, as a person who who teaches and believes in what he teaches, even though sometimes, like you said, Jim, there's going to be people against you and not agree with you and not hold by whatever standard you hold by. But the Rambam believed in what he was doing, and he says, I know I'm going to get flack for this, but if I can get one person, if I can teach one person,
That's right.
it's worth it. That is an incredible paragraph, and worded so amazingly. And kudos on the translator, because a lot
It
of hard
couldn't have
work.
been.
A
I
lot
wonder
of
how
hard
it's
work
spelled
he
in
went through
Arabic.
so far in 16 pages, but that one he nailed, and a great way to end. Well, we're not re-ending because now with the introduction. Well, I don't know. I thought we were already in the introduction, but we got another 3
This is
pages.
the third introduction to the first
Well,
to
there
the
are various introductions.
Okay, it's an introduction to the first chapter.
first chapter. Yeah.
But we're gonna have to wait till next week to get that. A lot of great stuff in what we did today. The Ayin Hara, I thought it was fantastic. 2 kinds of parables, right? We have the one where every word or every at least phrase needs to be spoken about and teaches us something, and then you have a second type of parable where usually there's just one major idea and not to think. And if you just kind of divvy that up, you're just doing yourself a disservice, and therefore understand. When I'm going through, says the Rambam, and I'm going to go through these things, you need to be able to make the distinction between the two, and of course, what is a parable and what is not. And then, lastly, we spoke about the instruction with respect to this treatise, which he is basically saying, you can listen to me, but don't if you haven't heard anybody else talk about what I've spoken about, then don't go around teaching this, and at the same time don't refute me. Give me the benefit of the doubt, like we should give the benefit of the doubt to all rabbis who are there, sages of our law, he calls them. And then lastly, like we said, I'm doing this because it's L'Shem Shamayim. I'm doing this because it's time to do something for Hashem. He feels this is necessary, almost like it is his purpose in life, almost, right? And he will do it no matter what repercussions he faces, and as long as one person is going to gain. And that was today's shiur in a nutshell. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. We had a few listeners here watching live. They're still watching live. Chazak u'Baruch for joining in. This goes on pretty much every Thursday, every week. Sometimes we skip a week, but that's. But generally, we try to learn as often as we can, or as consistent as we can. If you want to stay updated to our learning, I have to plug my channel, so please subscribe to the YouTube channel, and then you'll get notifications as well whenever we go live. And there's a lot of other things on the YouTube channel, not just this learning session, but there's also a lot of shiurim that I give throughout the week. And that's it. Wishing everybody here a wonderful night, and Shabbat Shalom, and we'll see you soon. Be well.
Shabbat Shalom. All the best.